Hey guys, part 2 here.
And it's hello from this man.
And it's hello from this chap next to me.
Hello, hi.
And we're still underground, up north, in a room full of amps, part 2. This time we're playing through a Vox AC30 and a Marshall
JMP18, 20 watts.
20 watts
20
JMP.
Yeah.
The Vox is from the mid-60s. It's a top boost and it's got tremolo vibrato on it, and it's got a blue, kind of Alnico blue speaker, and it's got a grey speaker. So it's probably a bit transition. It might have been messed around in its 55, 60-year-old life. Got to tell you, so I'm playing this cheapy Squire Cabronita to it. It sounds absolutely bloody gorgeous. I don't want to stop playing. It just sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to start banging on straight away. If you have the choice of spending the money on the guitar, 240 quid, or the amp, this amp is making this guitar sound incredible.
It is.
There you are.
Yeah,
now,
I mean,
what about yours?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is, I'm guessing this is a 1971. This is just a guess, Bob, because recently I've been getting into Marshall.
I do, a bit into Marshall. So you are a little bit smitten
by Marshall.
with the geekery and the capacitors and the transformers.
The
and
transformers.
The rheostats.
Absolutely. So I think the history, just the top of my head here, the history of this particular small box, sort of 18 watt, well, it's actually 20 watts, started life as a Watkins Dominator.
Oh, really? So it's based on that circuit?
Oh, it's a rip-off.
Oh, it's a straight knockoff.
It's a straight copy.
So just as in the world of pedals,
yeah.
right, there's no such thing as an original pedal since the Tube Screamer or whatever, in the same way it's true of amps too.
Absolutely, yeah. So, well, whatever...
And Marshalls were knockoffs of Fender Basements.
That's right, yeah. So whatever Mr. Watkins, I don't know how Mr. Watkins got his design, whether he went to the RCA handbook, the original, the RCA circuits.
Which everybody else seemed to go to the circuits for everything for,
But anyway, Mr. Watkins, I don't know his first name.
But he's obviously getting on a bit now, but he was online quite recently.
Mr. Watkins?
Talking about the guy who designed the Watkins Dominator. He wrote something. It
really
was fascinating.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because, of course, Watkins then became WEM, which stands for Watkins Electric
Manufacturing
Musical Instruments.
I'd a guess. Yeah.
And so anyway, getting back to this particular amp, this beautiful little small box Marshall, it started life as pretty much Marshall's version of a Watkins Dominator.
Right.
And then I guess they beefed it up with a transformer, the output transformer.
Right.
Now I think you can find some of the original 18 watt versions of these had radio spares transformers. Okay. So it's actually called a high grade mains transformer. I don't know how I know all this stuff. And they had an EL84 output tranny.
Okay.
Which is actually called the radio spares. No, it's called this is the output transformer. And it's called it's got, for some reason, radio spares called it an EL84 output transformer.
Like a tube, okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was dedicated, it was supposed to be for an EL84 tube.
Yeah, for 2 EL84s.
Right, okay.
Putting out 18 watts.
All right.
But this is, I think this one, by 71 they were using diagonal transformers, which maybe resulted in the 2 watt.
This is a 2x12 speaker cabinet?
We've got a 2x12, yeah. But to be honest, I don't know what Celestians are in here, but I mean, who knows? There could be some form of greenback or.
And so, I mean, bearing in mind, certainly for my ear at least, you know, the sound of the Vox is as much about clean and chime as it is about going into drive.
Beautiful, yeah, amazing.
But the sound of the Marshall for me is all about drive.
Yeah. So
how does this drive?
So let's go to full blast. Let's dime it, as they say. Here we go. So yeah,
that sounds pretty good. I mean, I'm right in front of the speaker, so obviously, you know,
we're gonna.
But that sounds pretty good. It sounds pretty raw. It sounds pretty rough.
Sounds pretty rough, but you know, you think about it. I mean, maybe because of the original Transformers, I think really played a big part in the Marshall sound, and the original Transformers were radio spares.
And you think they contributed to that slightly smoothed off, slightly warmer sound?
Yeah, lower wattage, breaking up at a lower wattage.
Okay.
I think that's what the radio spares Transformers did. Whereas the diagonal Transformers were maybe sound a bit more brittle when you get into overdrive, because they're going to give the amp more power, more clean power.
So
you know.
I understand not very much. I'm not electronics whiz, but I understand how valves, as they overload, begin to compress and create part of that signature sound.
Yeah.
I understand how speakers, when they're pushed really hard, how they begin not to behave in a nice linear, orderly, mechanical manner.
Yeah.
A bit like when you're at the gym and you've overdone it and you suddenly find your strength's going or whatever.
Yeah.
What I don't understand is transformers, which are basically two coils of wire around a metal core.
Yeah.
I don't understand how a transformer...
Well, they're pushing the speaker.
I know, but I don't understand how the transformer adds to that compression and distortion.
I guess this is a really interesting point of view, because everybody that has a JTM45 in the JTM45 world, you know, they say that the transformer is, you know,
it's vital.
Yeah. So like JTM45s are going for £10,000.
As long as they've got
the right transformer.
Original Drakes, Partridges, RSs.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So if it's got a repro, then the amp might be worth 8,000.
Yeah.
So these transformers are now
they sound good, but not quite the cigar.
Yeah. So that's why these transformers are worth a bit of money now. But you know, really, you know, can you hear the difference? Well, you know, according to the forums and everybody, you know, that the transformers do actually make a big difference. Obviously, the mains transformer is providing a different function, so that really doesn't impart a tone on the sound.
Not so much, but then again, I mean, it probably, like, you know, we've talked about the difference between valve and solid state rectifiers, which the mains transformer is powering,
right?
And they definitely have an impact on the amount of power that is available to the tubes when they're pushed, and therefore the amount of sag and compression and sweetness that you get.
Yeah,
but
you can normally
the mains transformer is probably even one step further.
Yeah, because that's about the impedance, and also, you know, that's actually the interface between the speaker and the amp is the output transformer.
Yeah.
So that's what's going to really.
It's important.
It's very important. Yeah.
It's
and that's why I think with this, even this 20 watt amp, if it had a radio spares high grade mains transformer and an EL84 output transformer, it's going to sound different.
Now these are EL84s, which are, I always get it mixed up with Marshall, because the bigger the number, the smaller the bottle. So the EL84s are the quite thin, tall tubes, like an AX7 that's been stretched.
Yeah. So if you got if you
EL34 was the bigger tubes. These are EL84s.
These are EL84s. Imagine these are almost a hi-fi amp, because back in the 60s, you know, you could buy a kit which would have, you know, like you've got the mono blocks for your hi-fi.
Yeah.
You know, obviously in the 60s you could get even a kit. You'd have a radio spares, 2 radio spares, output transformers. Okay, that would give, and you could run a pair of EL84s or other sort of equivalent radio sort of type tubes, valves. But of course, this is a mono. You know, amps are mono; they're not stereo. So we're just putting out a mono signal. So you've got, you know, 1 output transformer, you've got 1 mains transformer, and you've got 2 EL84s.
In push pull.
Yeah. And that was, you know, hi-fis around that time that played records were like two of these
right.
stuck together, and 18 watts was normally what you'd want in your house.
Yeah, that was funny. It wasn't until the 70s we started getting into 60, 70, 100 watt amps, was it?
Yeah, and because
for hi-fi.
Yeah, for hi-fi. In hi-fi, you want clean sound.
Yeah.
You're not wanting it to distort.
Yeah.
You want a clean signal. So that's really for me which is the Vox has got 4 EL84s, more powerful, twice as loud. Well, it's actually the wattage is and how we hear wattages is a little bit different because, for example, 50 watts is not half of 100 watts.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And also, when you say wattage, you know, a JTM45 is 30 watts, but that's 30 watts clean power. When you push the amp in distortion, then you're getting 35 watts. So again, the wattage is a bit sort of a give and take, but the reason the Vox is so beautiful and sounds so nice is because you've got these very chimey sound from the EL84.
Yeah, and their relationship with the transformer and the speaker.
Yeah. So I think even
I mean, my favourite Vox player that I can think of in a hurry would be Snowy White.
What?
Snowy White, you know, everyone thinks, well, he was playing kind of Gibsons through well, it's kind of a Marshall, isn't it? But most of his great work was through his trusty old Vox. He had his Vox AC30 as long as he had that amazing gold top from '57. This is real because these amps hadn't been used for some time, so there's a little bit of fizz and crackle and buzz and all the rest of it. I'm kind of hoping we're not blowing them up because, you know, if you read most of the forums these days, you've got people saying if an amp hasn't been used for even a few years, you should send it off to a tech for the valves to be looked at, for the capacitors, which are famous for kind of going a bit groggy and off spec, to be looked at and stuff. So we may be. I hope we're not doing any harm here, but we're certainly encountering some stretch on these amps, and there was certainly a bit of crackle coming in there that probably shouldn't.
Well, you know, I mean, the thing is, having a really, if you have a valve amp, and especially some vintage valve amps, just find a tech, an amp tech.
Easily said.
Yeah, take them out for dinner.
Well, yeah, and frankly, marry them.
Yes, and just be, because that's really.
And give them all your worldly goods and possessions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky because I found a young lad who lives actually not far from where we are now. In fact, I'm going to speak to Simon, who owns his amps. He's actually called WOW, W-A-U, amplification.
Okay.
And we collaborated on the Goosemaster.
Okay.
Which is the Goosemaster amp splitter. But
with the biggest volume control in the history of guitar.
Yeah. And he is only about 25, 26, and he's in a signed band.
Love it.
Signed indie band. But this guy's a genius, man. So I'm going to inform Simon of.
Okay, and Simon, while we're talking about it as well, your man who refurbed your
Martin Garton
of Garton Amplifiers. And one can find him on the interweb.
Absolutely.
Splendid. Well, he needs a shout out too because I mean,
in fact, I think one of the amps that was for sale at ATB was one of his.
His original designs.
Of his original design.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So really, you know, just wine and dine these fellas.
Well, because there are amp techs, but they are unusual. There's also
Yeah.
there's a guy I've met in Hackney in London called Jim Sweet, who has a shop, really interesting shop, very geeky shop full of amps, old amps, called Sweet Amps, Sweet Sounds. He's worth checking out as well because he knows what he's doing. So there are, thank God, people to look after these things because they are cranky and getting old and crankier. So they need a bit of love. But it's worth it because when they're working well, they just sound, you know, they just sound beautiful. This AC30 is one of the loveliest sounding amps I've heard. It's gorgeous. And it hasn't been used in anger since 1977, when it saw heavy exposure alongside the twin here and the Marshall in Alberto y los Trios Paranoios.
Snuff rock.
And an album called Snuff Rock. Probably get jailed or banged up by the wokies for titling an album like that these days, but that's what it's called. Very fine band, looking at the humorous side of rock music. And certainly amongst us musos of the time, we were all listening to them. In fact, when I met Simon, he said, "Oh, you won't have heard of my band." And I said, yeah. What? And yes, I have. They're a big deal, and they worked really hard. He was telling me just now, one year they did 300 gigs, which is, I'm lucky to get 3 gigs. Okay, it might be something about my playing, but hey. I'm just filling in, by the way, from my compadre here, who is tinkering around on the sound and
Technology,
more technology, but it's all under control over there.
So another interesting thing about these two amps, my good friend, is the AC30, the Vox AC30. It's a loud amp. You know, it's a very loud amp.
It is a loud amp.
I mean, Rory Gallagher, you know, was a great user.
Absolute taste. I saw him many times. Just him, you know, Strat Telecaster AC30.
And if you're literally sitting in the front row, that's going to bite your head off.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to smash glasses, especially with these Strat on the bridge pickup. So that's a lot. And to get that amp to distort, you're going to have to, you know, have some kind of
He used a treble booster.
a treble booster. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. And also, you know, especially with the Strat, because half might get it into distortion.
Yeah.
Snowy White, I love Snowy White, fantastic. In the Skies, Peter Green, In the Skies,
yes,
beautiful song. And I always thought, oh, Peter Green still had it, but he didn't. That was Snowy White playing all the lead stuff. Yeah, sadly, but Snowy White's a great player. This particular amp though is fantastic because you can get it to overdrive in a rehearsal situation, in a small gig, in a small bar gig. You can dime that, and you've got the Blues Breakers tone, pretty much. So that's the you know, for the AC30, you know, a very famous guitar player who we know as Mr. May has many of them and can dime them, but he's playing in stadiums, so he can no problem to turn them all up.
Well, you know, my dear friend Alan Darby was the principal guitarist in We Will Rock You for many years, and I did the tour of, you know, the pit where they played, and the amps and stuff. There's a room behind the guitar station on that side of the stage, completely isolated, and in the room, I think, were 6 AC30s. And Brian used to come in periodically, and just make sure that they were all set right. They hadn't drifted. But
make sure that they were using them and not some Kempler or something.
Well, and no Kempers. No, I mean, absolutely. His AC30s. It was knockoff Brian May replica guitars. Treble booster and a phaser of his choice.
Absolutely. MXR, probably.
And
because Phil Hilborn was on that gig as well.
Phil was on the gig,
great
Phil did the gig as a permanent, as a leading member of the cast in Germany. And when he was back in the UK, he used to dep because obviously he knew the the set.
He depped for Alan.
It was a roast. He depped for Alan. He depped for Laurie Wisefield, who was the other principal guitar player. But all those AC30s, and so we had a little laugh where we actually went in there. He said, "I'll just play a couple of chords." It was there's earthworks in that room.
Yeah, but you couldn't have that on stage because it was too loud for the audience.
Well, you'd be back to an argument with the sound engineer.
Absolutely.
Hey.
Yeah. So that's really where this small little Marshall really comes into its own, is being able to get these, you know, Eric Clapton type tones from 1966, you know, in your you know, local backroom pub rehearsal.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's a great amp for that. Whereas the Vox AC30 you're really gonna need an overdrive pedal to get any kind of,
Yeah.
But we could hear if you're playing clean country, Americana type chords
Magic.
with the Dan Electro,
Because it's got a little bit of chime and compression in it as well. And of course, the other thing not to recommend the AC30 is not the lightest of amps to lift, which is why it's got a handle at either end, because it needs it.
Yeah. Just make sure your back is not.
Stand up straight, young man.
I think you need one of those gym belts to lift it. So or a roadie.
They're supposed to stop the guts herniating, I think. And
really?
I just imagine these guys lifting these enormous weights and thinking, I'm sure you're earning some money for getting this world record, but this cannot be good for your back or your.
I mean, those guys all have heart
discs.
attacks.
Oh.
Late 20s, early 30s.
Jeez,
They
no
all have
thanks,
heart
no
attacks.
thanks. I'm going to be skinny and weak and old. Thanks.
No, he's looking in great shape, guys. He's hitting the Pilates, the yoga ball, everything.
No yoga ball today. We didn't bring that up north with us. I could have deflated it. Maybe next time.
Maybe next time. Anyway, it's
Here we
goodbye
are
from
doing
him.
amps. It's goodbye from us, from you and me, and an AC30 and a Marshall JMP18 or something.
Yeah. The JMP.
Yeah,
the
that
Marshall. Yeah, the Marshall
It's
JMP.
PA.
It's a PA. This is a Marshall JMP, but PA amp, 20 watt, 1971. There you go.
What's that supposed to be for voice? Well, hey, you learn something every day. Until next time, more fab amps in the next episode. Cheers, guys.
God bless, guys. Take care. Hasta luego. Amigos.